Hello everyone and welcome to Learn English with me, Fizz. Today, I have a powerful motivational story for you called Don't Waste Your Life. This story is written in simple English to help you improve your listening and vocabulary while inspiring you to make better choices in life. So sit back, relax, and let's begin. It was a quiet Monday morning. The first rays of sunlight slowly entered a small apartment where a 23-year-old young man named Ethan was sleeping. His alarm clock had been ringing for several minutes, but he reached out, turned it off, and whispered, "Just 5 more minutes." Those 5 minutes quickly became an hour. When he finally opened his eyes, the morning was almost gone. Ethan rushed out of bed, looked at the clock, and felt disappointed in himself once again. This had become his daily routine. Every night he promised himself that tomorrow would be different, but every morning he repeated the same mistakes. Ethan had big dreams. He wanted to become successful, build a meaningful career, make his parents proud, travel the world, and inspire other people. His room was filled with notebooks containing business ideas, daily schedules, motivational quotes, and long lists of goals. The first few pages of every notebook were neat and full of excitement, but the remaining pages were almost empty because Ethan loved making plans more than taking action. Instead of working toward his dreams, he spent hours scrolling through social media, watching motivational videos, and imagining a better future. Every video filled him with temporary excitement. He pictured himself giving speeches on big stages, living in a beautiful house, and hearing people applaud his success. But when the videos ended, so did his motivation. He watched another video, then another, until half the day had disappeared. His dreams stayed exactly where they had always been, in his imagination. One evening, feeling frustrated with himself, Ethan went to a nearby park. The sunset painted the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. Children were laughing, families were walking, and an elderly man with kind eyes sat down beside him on a wooden bench. After a few moments of silence, the old man smiled and asked, "You look worried." "What are you thinking about?" Ethan answered honestly. "I'm thinking about my future. I want to become successful, help my parents, and live a meaningful life. But I feel like I'm getting nowhere." The old man nodded and asked a simple question that immediately made Ethan uncomfortable. "What did you do today to move closer to your dreams?" Ethan searched his memory. He remembered waking up late, checking his phone, watching videos, eating, making another plan, and wasting hours online. Finally, he lowered his head and quietly replied, "Nothing." The old man looked at the setting sun and said, "Dreams are like seeds. A seed has everything it needs to become a great tree, but if it stays in your pocket, it will never grow. It must be planted. It must face rain, wind, and storms before it becomes strong. You have many seeds, Ethan, but your pockets are still full." Those words stayed in Ethan's mind long after he returned home. That night he could not sleep. He kept hearing the sentence over and over again, "Your pockets are still full." The next morning he woke up full of determination. He cleaned his room, organized his desk, bought a new notebook, and wrote in large letters on the first page, "My new life starts today." He believed everything was finally going to change. Just then his phone buzzed. A friend invited him to play games for 1 hour. Ethan smiled and thought, just 1 hour. But 1 hour became 3, then 5. By evening, he looked at his notebook again. The only thing written on the page was the title, "My new life starts today," nothing else. He closed the notebook slowly and realized that his biggest enemy was not bad luck, lack of money, or lack of talent. His biggest enemy was the small decisions he made every single day. One more video, one more game, one more excuse, one more tomorrow. Every small excuse quietly stole another piece of his future. That night, Ethan stood in front of the mirror and looked into his own eyes. For the first time in years, he asked himself an honest question. If I keep living like this, where will I be 5 years from now? The answer frightened him. He imagined himself older, still making excuses, still watching other people achieve their dreams while his own dreams slowly disappeared. A cold feeling ran through his body. At that moment, he understood something that would change his life forever. Time was not waiting for him. Every day he wasted was a day of his life that would never return. He took a deep breath, looked at his reflection, and whispered, "I don't need another perfect plan. I need my first real step." For the first time in a very long time, Ethan decided that tomorrow would no longer be another empty promise. Tomorrow would be the day he finally began. The next morning, Ethan woke up before his alarm rang. For a few seconds, he stared at the ceiling, and the familiar voice inside his head whispered, "Sleep a little longer. You can start tomorrow." It was the same excuse he had listened to for years. But this time, another voice answered, "If not today, then when?" Ethan slowly got out of bed, made his bed, drank a glass of water, opened the window, and let the fresh morning air fill his room. As the golden sunlight spread across the floor, he felt a quiet sense of hope. Instead of creating another long list of impossible goals, he opened his notebook and wrote only one sentence: "Today, I will complete one important task." After breakfast, he sat at his desk and was about to begin when his phone vibrated with several notifications. Friends had sent funny videos, messages, and social media updates. For a moment, he felt the temptation to check them. He knew that just one click could steal hours from his day. He looked at the phone, smiled, switched it off, and placed it inside a drawer. "My dreams are more important than my distractions," he whispered. Then he focused completely on his work. The first 20 minutes were difficult. His mind wanted to quit. It wanted comfort instead of effort. But Ethan stayed in his chair. Minute by minute, his concentration improved. An hour later, he completed the task he had promised himself. It was not perfect, but it was finished. He leaned back in his chair with a smile. For the first time in years, he experienced the satisfaction that comes from taking action instead of making excuses. At that moment, he realized something important. He had spent years waiting to feel motivated before starting his work, but now he understood that motivation often appears after you begin, not before. That afternoon, Ethan returned to the same park where he had met the elderly man. The old man was sitting quietly on the familiar wooden bench, watching birds fly across the sky. When he saw Ethan, he smiled warmly. "You look different today," he said. Ethan smiled back. "I completed my first important task." The old man nodded with pride and asked, "How do you feel?" Ethan answered honestly, "I feel stronger than yesterday." The old man pointed toward a tall tree nearby and said, "Do you see that tree? It did not become strong overnight. Every day it grew a little. No one noticed its progress because it was so small, but after many years, everyone admired its strength. Your life works the same way. Never underestimate one small step, because thousands of small steps create extraordinary results." Ethan looked at the tree for a long moment. Its roots were hidden beneath the ground, yet they were the reason it stood so firmly against every storm. He understood that discipline was like those invisible roots. People only admired success, but they rarely saw the daily habits that made success possible. From that day forward, Ethan created a simple routine. He woke up early every morning, exercised for 30 minutes, read at least 10 pages of a good book, completed one important task before checking his phone, and ended each day by writing down what he had learned. Some mornings were easy, while others were incredibly difficult. There were days when he felt tired, lazy, and unmotivated. There were moments when his old habits tried to pull him back. His mind whispered, "Skip today, one day won't matter." But Ethan reminded himself that his old life had been built by small bad habits, and his new life would be built by small good habits. Every choice mattered. One evening, while cleaning his room, he found several old notebooks filled with unfinished plans and empty promises. He smiled sadly as he looked through them. They reminded him of the person he used to be, a person who loved dreaming but feared doing. He closed those notebooks, placed them in a drawer, and opened a brand new one. On the first page, he wrote in bold letters, "Less planning, more action." Every night after that, he answered one simple question before going to sleep: "What did I do today that made tomorrow better?" Some days the answer filled an entire page. Other days it was only one sentence, but every single day had an answer, because every single day included action. Weeks passed, and the people around him slowly began noticing the difference. His parents saw him waking up before sunrise. His friends noticed he spent less time online. His room became organized, his mind became calmer, and his confidence quietly returned. One afternoon, an old friend met him by chance and said, "Ethan, you've changed. You seem happier and more focused." "What's your secret?" Ethan smiled and replied, "I stopped trying to change my whole life in one day. Instead, I started changing one day at a time." His friend looked thoughtful. That night, Ethan stood outside beneath the stars and reflected on how much had already changed. He was still far from his biggest dreams, but for the first time, he knew he was walking toward them instead of simply imagining them. He realized that success is never created in one dramatic moment. It is built quietly through ordinary mornings, disciplined afternoons, and peaceful evenings when no one is watching. As he looked at the night sky, he whispered with confidence, "I may not be where I want to be yet, but I am no longer standing still." And in that moment, he understood that the first victory in life is not becoming successful, it is becoming the kind of person who refuses to give up. A new month began. And although nothing around Ethan looked very different, everything inside him had changed. He still lived in the same apartment, walked the same streets, and worked at the same desk, but his attitude toward life was no longer the same. Every morning before the sun rose, he woke up with one purpose: to become a little better than he had been yesterday. His routine was simple. He exercised, read a few pages of a good book, completed his most important task before checking his phone, and ended each day by writing one lesson in his notebook. There was nothing exciting about this routine, yet it slowly transformed his life. Ethan realized that success was not built by one big decision, but by hundreds of small choices repeated every day. One afternoon, he met his childhood friend Ryan at a small cafe. Ryan looked exhausted. He had dark circles under his eyes and spent most of the conversation looking at his phone. "Life is too short," Ryan laughed. "Why work so hard? I just want to enjoy myself." Ethan smiled calmly. "Enjoying life is important," he replied, "but wasting life is something completely different." Ryan looked confused. Ethan picked up a spoon from the table and placed it in front of him. "Imagine this spoon represents one day of your life," he said. Then he placed several more spoons beside it. "Every morning, life gives us another day. Every night, one spoon disappears forever. We can never get it back. The question is not how many days we have. The question is what we do with the day we have today." Ryan became silent. For the first time, he looked away from his phone. Those simple words stayed with him long after they left the cafe. A few days later, Ethan received an email from a company where he had applied for an internship months earlier. His heart beat faster as he opened it, hoping for good news. Instead, he read the words, "We are sorry to inform you that your application has not been successful." For a moment, disappointment filled his heart. The old Ethan would have spent the rest of the day complaining, blaming bad luck, and giving up. But this time, he closed his laptop, took a deep breath, and opened his notebook. At the top of a fresh page, he wrote, "What can this failure teach me?" He realized that rejection was not the end of his journey. It was simply feedback showing him where he needed to improve. Instead of feeling sorry for himself, he began learning new skills, practicing every evening, reading more books, and improving a little every single day. One evening, while sitting in the park, the elderly man saw him studying and smiled proudly. "You seem busy," he said. Ethan nodded. "I was rejected, but I decided to improve instead of complain." The old man smiled warmly. "That is the difference between people who succeed and people who quit. Failure is not your enemy. It is your teacher. The only question is whether you are willing to learn." Ethan wrote those words in his notebook because he knew they would guide him for the rest of his life. Weeks turned into months and people slowly began noticing the change. His parents saw him waking up early every day. His friends noticed he spent less time online and more time learning. His confidence grew not because life had become easier, but because he had become stronger. One rainy afternoon, Ethan walked past a construction site where workers were building a large office building. He watched a worker carefully place one brick after another. No one celebrated each brick, yet every brick mattered. Suddenly, Ethan understood another important lesson. A successful life is built exactly the same way: one habit, one decision, 1 hour, and 1 day at a time. There are no shortcuts, there is only consistency. That evening, he returned home, opened his notebook, and wrote, "Great lives are not built in a single moment. They are built through small actions repeated every day." As he closed the notebook, he smiled. He had not reached his biggest dreams yet, but he was no longer waiting for life to change. He had become the person who created change through his own actions, and that made all the difference. As the months passed, Ethan became stronger in ways that no one could immediately see. His success was not measured by money, awards, or recognition. It was measured by the choices he made every single day. There were still mornings when he felt tired. There were still evenings when he wanted to waste hours scrolling through his phone or watching endless videos. The difference was that he no longer allowed his feelings to control his actions. He had learned that discipline is doing what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like doing it. One weekend, Ethan visited his parents. His mother prepared his favorite meal, and after lunch, they sat together in the garden. His father looked at him and smiled. "You've changed," he said. "You seem calmer, happier, and more confident." Ethan smiled back. "I finally realized that life doesn't change in one big moment. It changes through the small decisions we make every day." His father nodded proudly. "When you were younger, I wanted to teach you that lesson, but wisdom cannot be forced. Sometimes life becomes our greatest teacher." Those words stayed with Ethan as he walked home that evening. On his way, he passed a playground where a little boy was learning to ride a bicycle. Again and again, the boy fell to the ground. His knees were covered in dust and tears filled his eyes, but each time he stood up and tried again. Other children laughed, but he ignored them. After many attempts, he finally balanced himself and rode across the playground with a huge smile on his face. Ethan watched quietly and realized that success always looks easy after it happens, but people rarely see the struggles that come before it. Every successful person has fallen many times. The only difference is that they chose to stand up one more time than they fell. That night, Ethan wrote another lesson in his notebook: failure is temporary. Giving up makes it permanent. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. The same company that had rejected his application months earlier contacted him again. They had noticed the new projects he had completed and the skills he had continued to develop. They invited him for another interview. Instead of feeling nervous, Ethan spent the next several days preparing. He practiced answering questions, improved his communication skills, and reviewed everything he had learned. On the day of the interview, he walked into the office with quiet confidence. He answered honestly, admitted when he didn't know something, and showed a willingness to keep learning. A few days later, he received another email. This time, it began with the word "Congratulations." He had been accepted. Ethan closed his eyes and smiled. He remembered the young man who once woke up late every morning, wasted hours on meaningless distractions, and kept saying, "I'll start tomorrow." That version of himself felt very far away now. When he shared the news with his parents, his mother hugged him with tears in her eyes, and his father said, "We were never worried about your abilities. We only hoped you would one day believe in yourself." Those words meant more to Ethan than getting the job itself. On his first day at work, he noticed something interesting. Some employees arrived late every morning. Some complained about every task. Others spent more time making excuses than solving problems. Ethan did not judge them because he remembered that he had once lived the same way. Instead, he focused on improving himself. He arrived early, listened carefully, learned from experienced coworkers, and completed every task with honesty. People soon began trusting him because they knew he would always do his best. One evening after work, his childhood friend Ryan called and asked to meet in the same park where Ethan had first met the elderly man. Ryan looked worried. "I need your advice," he admitted. "I've been wasting my life and I don't know how to change." Ethan picked up a small stone from the ground and placed it in Ryan's hand. "Hold this for 1 minute," he said. Ryan did. "Was it heavy?" Ethan asked. "Not really," Ryan replied. "Now imagine carrying it every hour of every day for the next 10 years. Ryan nodded slowly. "It would become unbearable." Ethan smiled. "Excuses are exactly like this stone. They seem small today, but if you carry them for years, they become the heaviest burden in your life. The moment you put them down, your future becomes lighter. Ryan looked at the stone for a long moment before placing it gently on the ground. He smiled and said, "Today is the day I stop carrying my excuses." As they walked home together beneath the evening sky, Ethan realized that true success is not just about changing your own life. It is about becoming an example that inspires other people to believe they can change theirs too. From that day forward, he promised himself that whenever he met someone who had lost hope, he would remind them that a better life never begins with a giant leap. It always begins with one small decision, one courageous step, and the choice to stop saying tomorrow and finally start saying today. Months passed and Ethan's life continued to improve. Not because he had become lucky, but because he had become consistent. He understood that success was not something you reached once and kept forever. It had to be built again every single day through discipline, patience, and hard work. Every morning, he woke up before sunrise, exercised, read a few pages from a good book, and planned his day before touching his phone. Many people asked him, "How do you stay motivated every day?" Ethan always smiled and gave the same answer: "I don't depend on motivation, I depend on commitment." Motivation comes and goes, but commitment stays. One evening after work, Ethan returned to the park where he had met the elderly man who had changed his life. The familiar wooden bench was still there, the trees were gently moving in the wind, and the birds were singing as the sun slowly disappeared behind the hills. Ethan looked around, hoping to see the old man again, but the bench was empty. Days turned into weeks, and he never saw him. Finally, he asked another elderly man who often visited the park, "Do you know the gentleman who used to sit on this bench every evening?" The man smiled kindly and replied, "You mean Mr. Thomas." He moved to another city to live with his daughter. Ethan felt both happy and sad. Happy because Mr. Thomas was with his family, and sad because he never had the chance to thank him. The elderly man noticed the expression on Ethan's face and said, "If someone truly changed your life, you don't thank them only with words. You thank them by living the lessons they taught you." Those words touched Ethan deeply. As he walked home, he realized that the greatest way to honor a teacher is to become living proof of their wisdom. A few weeks later, Ethan's manager called him into the office. For a moment, he wondered if he had done something wrong. Instead, the manager smiled and said, "Ethan, I've been watching your work closely. You arrive early, you never complain, you help your coworkers, and you always look for ways to improve. That attitude is rare. We'd like to offer you a promotion." Ethan could hardly believe what he had heard. Only a year earlier, he could barely manage his own time. Now people trusted him with greater responsibilities. That evening, he called his parents and shared the good news. His mother became emotional and said, "We always prayed for this day." His father smiled proudly and replied, "Son, I'm happy that you were promoted. But I'm even happier because success never changed your character." Those words meant more to Ethan than the promotion itself. He realized that money can improve your lifestyle, but good character improves your entire life. The following Sunday, Ethan decided to visit the neighborhood where he had grown up. As he walked through the familiar streets, memories came rushing back. He passed the small grocery store where he used to buy snacks, the playground where he had spent countless afternoons, and finally the apartment where he had once wasted so many precious days. He stood there quietly, remembering the young man who believed tomorrow would solve everything. Looking at the building, he smiled and whispered, "I forgive you. You didn't know how valuable time really was." Just then, he noticed a teenage boy sitting on the steps outside the building, staring at his phone with a frustrated expression. His school bag lay beside him, untouched. Ethan sat next to him and gently asked, "Is everything okay?" The boy sighed and replied, "I have big dreams, but I never finish anything. Every day I tell myself I'll start tomorrow." Ethan smiled because those words sounded painfully familiar. He picked up a small seed that had fallen from a nearby tree and placed it in the boy's hand. "Do you see this seed?" he asked. The boy nodded. "This tiny seed doesn't become a strong tree overnight. It grows little by little, day after day. Success works the same way. People admire the tree, but they forget the years it spent growing quietly. The boy looked thoughtfully at the seed. What if I fail? He asked. Ethan answered with confidence, you probably will. Everyone fails. The important question is not whether you fail. The important question is whether you get up and try again. Every failure teaches you something that success never can. The boy slowly smiled and placed his phone inside his bag. I'm going home to study, he said. Ethan watched him walk away with hope in his eyes. At that moment, he realized that one conversation had once changed his own life, and perhaps today one conversation had changed someone else's. As he continued walking beneath the evening sky, he understood a beautiful truth. Success is not measured only by the goals you achieve. It is also measured by the number of people you inspire to believe that they can change their own lives. Before going to bed that night, Ethan opened his notebook and wrote one final lesson for the day. Every sunrise gives you another opportunity, but no sunrise lasts forever. Respect your time, protect your dreams, and remember that the future you want is created by the choices you make today, not by the promises you make about tomorrow. As time moved forward, Ethan slowly became the person he had once dreamed of becoming. His life was not perfect and he still faced difficult days, but he had learned that challenges were not roadblocks, they were opportunities to grow. Every morning, he followed the same routine with quiet discipline. He woke up before sunrise, exercised, read books that expanded his mind, and spent time learning new skills before beginning his work. Many people believed that successful people had easier lives, but Ethan knew the truth. Success did not remove problems, it simply gave you the strength and wisdom to face them. One rainy evening, while organizing his bookshelf, Ethan found one of his oldest notebooks. He slowly turned the pages and smiled. The first page contained dreams written years ago. I want to become successful. I want to make my parents proud. I want to inspire people. I want to live without regrets. At that moment, he realized that many of those dreams had already come true, not because life had been kind to him, but because he had refused to give up. He gently closed the notebook and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me where I started." A few days later, Ethan received an invitation to speak at a local community event where young students were looking for guidance. At first, he felt nervous because he had never spoken in front of such a large audience, but then he remembered that fear had stopped him enough times in the past. He smiled and accepted the invitation. On the day of the event, the hall was filled with students, teachers, and parents. Ethan walked onto the stage and looked at the audience. He saw hope in some faces, fear in others, and confusion in many. He took a deep breath and began. I am not standing here because I was the smartest student, he said. I am standing here because I stopped making excuses. Years ago, I wasted my mornings, blamed my circumstances, and waited for tomorrow to change my life. But tomorrow never changed anything. The day I changed was the day I took responsibility for my own choices. The audience became completely silent. Ethan continued, many people think successful people are always motivated. That is not true. There were many mornings when I wanted to stay in bed. There were many evenings when I wanted to quit, but discipline taught me something motivation never could. You don't have to feel ready to begin, you only have to begin. After the speech, many students came to thank him. One young woman said, I always thought confidence comes first. Ethan smiled and replied, no, confidence comes after action. Every small victory gives you the courage to take the next step. Another student asked, what if people laugh at my dreams? Ethan answered gently, people may laugh today. But if you keep working while they keep laughing, one day those same people will admire your success. Never allow someone else's opinion to become stronger than your own belief. As the crowd slowly left the hall, one young man remained standing near the door. He looked worried and exhausted. Ethan walked over and asked, is something on your mind? The young man lowered his head and said, I've failed 3 important exams. My family thinks I'm wasting my life, and honestly, I'm starting to believe them. I feel like giving up. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder and asked, tell me honestly, what did those failures teach you? The young man thought for a moment before answering. They taught me that I wasn't disciplined. I wasted too much time and I always started studying too late. Ethan smiled warmly. Then those failures were not useless, they became your teachers. The only real failure is refusing to learn. The young man's eyes slowly filled with hope. Do you really believe I can change? He asked. Ethan answered without hesitation, absolutely. Your past explains where you've been, but it does not decide where you're going. Every new day gives you another opportunity to become a different person. Several months later, Ethan received a handwritten letter. It was from that same student. The letter read, Dear Ethan, the conversation we had after your speech changed my life. I stopped making excuses, followed a daily routine, studied consistently, and passed my exams. For the first time in years, I believe in myself. Thank you for teaching me that success begins with one small decision. Ethan folded the letter carefully and smiled with gratitude. At that moment, he understood something more valuable than any promotion or achievement. True success is not measured by the money you earn or the title you hold. True success is measured by the lives you inspire and the hope you give to people who have almost given up. That evening, Ethan returned to the quiet park where his journey had first begun. He sat on the same wooden bench beneath the old tree and watched the sunset paint the sky with beautiful shades of orange and gold. He remembered the elderly man who had once asked him a simple question that changed everything. What did you do today to move closer to your dreams? Ethan smiled and looked toward the sky. If he could answer that question today, his answer would be different. Today, he had not only moved closer to his own dreams, but he had also helped others move closer to theirs. And he realized that a meaningful life is not about collecting success for yourself. It is about becoming a light that helps other people find their own path, one step, one choice, and one day at a time. Years passed, and Ethan's life continued to move forward with purpose. He was no longer chasing success just to prove something to the world. Instead, he wanted to become the best version of himself every single day. His mornings still began before sunrise. He still exercised, read books, wrote in his notebook, and planned his day carefully. Many people were surprised that he continued following the same routine even after achieving many of his goals. One of his coworkers once asked, Ethan, you've already built a successful career. Why do you still work so hard? Ethan smiled and replied, because discipline is not something you practice until you become successful. It is something you practice to remain successful. Those words stayed with everyone who heard them. One weekend, Ethan attended a reunion with his old school friends. It had been many years since they had all met together. Everyone shared stories about their lives, careers, and families. Some were happy, while others quietly admitted that they felt disappointed with the direction their lives had taken. During the gathering, Ethan noticed his old classmate Alex sitting alone near the window. Alex had been one of the brightest students in school, and everyone expected him to achieve great things. Ethan walked over with a warm smile and asked, May I join you? Alex nodded. After a few minutes of conversation, Alex sighed deeply and said, I wasted so many years waiting for the perfect opportunity. I kept saying I would start tomorrow, and now I feel like I've fallen far behind everyone else. Ethan listened carefully because he understood that feeling better than anyone. He gently replied, the biggest mistake isn't starting late. The biggest mistake is believing it's too late to start. Alex looked at him with tired eyes. But I've already lost so much time. Ethan picked up a small flower from the table and held it in his hand. Imagine a gardener forgets to plant seeds during one season. Should he give up forever or should he plant them in the next season? Alex smiled slightly. He should plant them in the next season. Ethan nodded. Exactly. You can't change yesterday, but you can still change tomorrow by using today wisely. Those words filled Alex with hope. Before leaving the reunion, he shook Ethan's hand and said, Tonight I'm going home with a different mindset. I'm done waiting. I'm going to begin. A few weeks later, Ethan received a message from Alex. It read, I started studying again. I reduced my screen time, joined an online course, and created a daily routine. For the first time in years, I feel like my life is moving forward. Thank you for reminding me that it's never too late. Ethan smiled as he read the message. He realized once again that encouragement costs nothing, but it can change someone's entire future. That evening, while walking home, Ethan noticed a man sitting alone on a park bench with his head lowered. He looked tired and defeated. Ethan sat beside him and politely asked, "Are you all right?" The man smiled sadly and replied, "I work every day, but I feel like my life has no purpose. I wake up, go to work, come home, sleep, and repeat the same routine. Years are passing, but I don't feel like I'm growing." Ethan thought for a moment before answering. Being busy is not the same as making progress. You can spend years climbing a ladder, but if it's leaning against the wrong wall, you'll reach the top and realize you climbed in the wrong direction. The man looked surprised. "So what should I do?" Ethan answered. "Ask yourself one question every night before you sleep. Did I become a better person today than I was yesterday? If the answer is yes, keep going. If the answer is no, don't feel guilty, just improve tomorrow." The man thanked him sincerely. As Ethan continued walking, he reflected on his own journey. There was a time when he believed success meant achieving one big goal. Now he understood that life was much deeper than that. Every day offered another opportunity to learn, improve, forgive, help someone, and become wiser. Before going to bed that night, Ethan opened his notebook and wrote another lesson. Never measure your life by how fast you move. Measure it by how faithfully you move in the right direction. He closed the notebook with a peaceful smile. Looking out of his window at the stars shining above the city, he realized that life is not about racing against other people. It is about becoming a little stronger, a little kinder, a little wiser, and a little more grateful every single day. When you focus on daily progress instead of instant perfection, you discover that success is not a destination waiting somewhere in the future. Success is the person you become through the choices you make today. As the years passed, Ethan became known not only for his success but also for his kindness, humility, and willingness to help others. People often asked him to speak at schools, universities, and community events because they wanted to understand how an ordinary young man had completely transformed his life. Whenever Ethan stood in front of an audience, he never spoke about becoming rich or famous. Instead, he spoke about something far more valuable: time. "Every person in this room," he would say, "is given the same 24 hours each day. The difference between an ordinary life and an extraordinary one is not how much time you have. It is how wisely you use it." One day, Ethan was invited to speak at a university graduation ceremony. Hundreds of students sat before him, excited but uncertain about their future. Looking at their faces reminded him of himself many years earlier. He smiled and began, "When I graduated, I thought success would come quickly. I believed one day everything would suddenly change. But life taught me a different lesson. Nothing changes until you change, nothing grows until you grow, and nothing improves until you improve." The entire hall became silent. Ethan continued, "Many people spend years searching for the perfect opportunity, but opportunities often appear only after you begin working. Don't wait for confidence before taking action. Confidence is built by taking action." After the speech, dozens of students gathered around him with questions. One student asked, "How do I stop comparing myself to others?" Ethan smiled and answered, "Comparison steals happiness. There will always be someone richer, smarter, faster, or more successful than you, but there has never been another person exactly like you. Stop competing with everyone else and start competing with the person you were yesterday." Another student asked, "What if I fail after trying my best?" Ethan replied, "Failure is painful, but regret is much more painful. A person who fails can learn and try again. A person who never tries spends the rest of life wondering what might have happened." Those words touched many hearts. As Ethan was leaving the university, a young woman ran toward him holding a notebook. "Mr. Ethan," she said, "would you write one sentence that I should remember for the rest of my life?" Ethan thought for a moment before writing, "Your future is hidden inside your daily habits." She read the sentence several times before smiling with gratitude. Weeks later, Ethan received a letter from her. She wrote that she had stopped wasting hours on social media, started reading every morning, and finally launched the small business she had dreamed about for years. Ethan smiled because he realized once again that one simple sentence could change someone's direction forever. One evening, while walking home through the familiar park, he sat on the same old wooden bench where everything had begun. The gentle wind moved through the trees and children laughed in the distance. Ethan closed his eyes and remembered the first conversation he had with Mr. Thomas. One question had changed his entire life. What did you do today to move closer to your dreams? That question still guided him every single evening. Before going to sleep, he always asked himself the same thing. Some days his answer was long, other days it was short, but he never allowed a day to end without making at least one step forward. That simple habit kept him growing year after year. Looking at the sunset, Ethan realized something many people never understand. Success is not built in extraordinary moments. It is built in ordinary mornings when you choose to wake up instead of giving up, in quiet afternoons when you continue working even though nobody is watching, and in peaceful evenings when you reflect on your progress instead of making excuses. Every sunrise is an invitation to begin again. Every sunset asks whether you used your time wisely. Ethan stood up from the bench with a grateful heart and smiled at the sky. He knew there would always be new challenges, new goals, and new lessons to learn. But he was no longer afraid of the future because he had learned the greatest secret of all. If you use today well, tomorrow will take care of itself. Every meaningful life is built one day at a time, one habit at a time, and one courageous decision at a time. Several more years passed, and Ethan realized that the greatest reward in life was not the job he had earned, the promotions he had received, or the goals he had achieved. The greatest reward was waking up every morning with peace in his heart, knowing that he was living with purpose instead of regret. One weekend, he organized a free workshop at a local community center. There were no tickets, no advertisements, and no entrance fee. Anyone who wanted to improve their life was welcome. To Ethan's surprise, the hall was filled with students, parents, workers, and even retired people. They all came from different backgrounds, but they shared one common desire: they wanted a better future. Ethan stood in front of them with a gentle smile and held up a blank sheet of paper. "Imagine this paper is one day of your life," he said. "Every morning, life gives you a fresh page. You can fill it with learning, hard work, kindness, gratitude, and progress. Or you can fill it with excuses, complaints, and wasted hours. At the end of the day, that page becomes permanent. You cannot erase it, and you cannot write it again. That is why every single day matters." The room became completely silent. A middle-aged man raised his hand and asked, "What if I have already wasted many years? Can I still change?" Ethan smiled warmly and replied, "Let me ask you something. If you are driving on the wrong road for several hours, do you continue driving in the wrong direction just because you've already traveled so far?" The man shook his head. "No. I turn around." Ethan nodded. "Exactly. The moment you realize you're on the wrong path is the moment you should choose a better one. Your past cannot be changed, but your direction can." The audience applauded because many people felt those words deeply. After the workshop ended, a little girl walked toward Ethan holding her father's hand. She looked at him with curious eyes and asked, "What is the most important thing I should learn while I'm still young?" Ethan knelt beside her and smiled. "Learn to value your time. Toys become old, clothes become small, and money comes and goes. But every day you spend learning, helping others, and becoming a better person stays with you forever." The little girl smiled brightly, and her father quietly thanked Ethan before they left. Watching them walk away, Ethan realized that changing even one young life could change the future of an entire family. That evening, he visited his parents once again. His mother served tea while his father sat peacefully in the garden watching the sunset. After a long silence, his father looked at him and said, "Do you know what makes me happiest?" Ethan smiled. "What is it?" His father replied, "Years ago, I prayed that you would become successful. Today, I thank God because you became a good man first." Success without character never lasts, but good character creates success that no one can take away. Ethan felt emotional as he listened. He understood that the greatest achievement in life is not becoming important in the eyes of the world. It is becoming someone your family is proud of and someone your own heart can respect. That night, he returned home and opened the notebook he had carried with him for so many years. The first pages were filled with dreams, the middle pages were filled with struggles and lessons, and the newest pages were filled with gratitude. He turned to a blank page and slowly wrote, "Your habits become your future, your choices become your character. Your character becomes your destiny." He looked at the words for a long time before gently closing the notebook. Standing by the window, he watched the lights of the city shine beneath the night sky. Somewhere, a student was studying for an important exam. Somewhere, a young entrepreneur was working on a dream. Somewhere, a parent was working late to give their children a better life. And somewhere, another person was wasting precious hours believing there would always be another tomorrow. Ethan quietly whispered, "Life doesn't ask us to be perfect. It asks us to be faithful with the time we are given." He smiled, knowing that every sunrise is a gift, every hour is an opportunity, and every decision writes another sentence in the story of our lives. The future is never created by one extraordinary moment. It is created by ordinary days that we choose not to waste. Many years had passed since Ethan made the decision that changed his life forever. The young man who once wasted his mornings, postponed his dreams, and filled his days with excuses had become someone who valued every sunrise as a precious gift. His hair had started to turn gray and a few lines had appeared on his face, but his heart was stronger than ever. One quiet morning, Ethan woke up before dawn just as he had done for many years. He stepped outside with a warm cup of tea and watched the sky slowly change from darkness to light. The birds welcomed the new day with cheerful songs, and a gentle breeze reminded him how beautiful life could be when you truly paid attention. He smiled because there was a time when he would have slept through moments like this without realizing how valuable they were. Looking at the sunrise, he remembered the young man he used to be. He remembered the endless excuses, the wasted hours, the unfinished plans, and the belief that tomorrow would somehow change everything. But tomorrow had never changed his life. One decision had. The decision to stop waiting and start acting. A few weeks later, Ethan was invited to speak at an international conference where thousands of people had gathered to learn about leadership, personal growth, and purpose. As he walked onto the stage, the audience welcomed him with warm applause. He stood silently for a few moments before speaking. "I am not standing here because I was the most talented person," he began. "I am standing here because I stopped making excuses. I realized that life rewards action, not intention. Dreams remain dreams until you are willing to work for them every single day." The audience listened carefully as Ethan continued. "For many years, I believed success meant earning more money, receiving promotions, or becoming well-known, but life taught me a much deeper lesson. Success is waking up every morning with peace in your heart, knowing that you are using your time wisely, growing into a better person, and helping others whenever you can. If you become rich but lose your character, you have failed. If you become famous but forget your purpose, you have failed. True success is living a life you can be proud of." Many people nodded as they listened. Some quietly wiped away tears because they saw their own lives in Ethan's story. After the conference ended, hundreds of people came to thank him. Among them was a young man who looked exactly as Ethan had looked years ago, confused, discouraged, and afraid of the future. The young man asked, "Can I really change my life?" Ethan smiled warmly and replied, "Of course you can. Never believe that one bad chapter means your story is over. Every sunrise gives you a blank page. What matters is what you choose to write on it." The young man thanked him and walked away with hope in his eyes. Watching him leave, Ethan remembered the elderly man named Mr. Thomas, whose simple question had changed everything. "What did you do today to move closer to your dreams?" Ethan realized that Mr. Thomas had once passed a light to him, and now it was his turn to pass that light to someone else. That is how hope travels through the world, not through miracles, but through ordinary people choosing to encourage one another. Later that evening, Ethan returned home and opened the notebook that had been with him throughout his journey. He turned to the very last blank page. For a long moment, he simply looked at it, remembering every lesson life had taught him. Then he picked up his pen and wrote his final message: "Life is the most valuable gift you will ever receive. Every sunrise is another opportunity. Every hour is another chance. Every choice matters. Do not wait for perfect conditions. Do not wait until you feel ready. Do not wait for someone else to believe in you. Begin today. Take one small step, then another, and never stop moving forward. Respect your time because it is the one treasure that can never be replaced. Protect your dreams because they shape your future. Learn every day because knowledge gives you freedom. Be kind because success means little if you leave no kindness behind. Help others whenever you can because the greatest purpose of life is not only to rise yourself but to lift others as well. And never forget that the greatest tragedy is not failure. The greatest tragedy is reaching the end of your life with the painful realization that you never truly lived." Ethan gently closed the notebook and placed it back on the shelf. He no longer needed to read those words because they had become part of who he was. That night, he stood by the window and looked at the stars shining brightly above the quiet city. His heart was filled with gratitude, not because his journey had been easy, but because every challenge had shaped him into the person he had become. He smiled softly and whispered, "Thank you, life, for giving me a second chance." As the night grew quieter, Ethan understood one final truth: life is not measured by the number of years you live. It is measured by the number of moments you truly live with purpose, courage, gratitude, and love. One day, every person will reach the final page of their own story. When that day comes, make sure your heart is filled not with excuses, but with memories of dreams you chased, people you helped, lessons you learned, and a life you refused to waste. Remember, your future does not begin tomorrow. It begins with the choice you make today, so never waste your life. Live with purpose, live with discipline, live with kindness, live with gratitude. And make every single day a page worth remembering. The end. So bye-bye, thanks for watching, subscribe for more interesting stories and learn English through story.